The Georgia Department of Economic Development Technology Association of Georgia, or TAG, have partnered to form the Georgia Defense Industrial Base Task Force to provide resources and support for Georgia's 4,000 defense contractors. Our dedicated project manager, Cassia Baker, can help your defense contracting company find support services and expertise across a variety of topics, including CMMC. For more information on how the task force can help your business, please go to georgia.org/cybersecurityedge or tagonline.org. Today, Mark Lupo, the Business, Education, and Resilience Specialist for UGA's Small Business Development Center, will offer some guidance on preparing for CMMC, beginning with Level 1. Mark has been working with SBDC in a variety of roles since 2005 and is well known for his passion for working with entrepreneurs and small business. Mark's extraordinarily broad background includes serving as a medical supervisor and language specialist in the U.S. Army, a 20-year healthcare career in both clinical and administrative roles, as well as owning 2 art galleries and a real estate company. Mark has been recognized twice with the Llewellyn Award for Consulting Excellence as the top SBDC consultant in Georgia. Thank you, Mark, for sharing your expertise with our audience today.
Thank you, Amy. A pleasure to be here. For those familiar with our organization at the university, we believe that the right idea, the right resource, the right contact at the right time in someone's life can be life-changing. Our role is to help create an environment where those connections can happen. And as we do so, we help the business owners we work with get stronger. They can build a stronger business, which can lead to a stronger and more resilient community. And that's really our ultimate mission. Our organization has 18 offices across the state, serving all counties in Georgia. 11 of these offices are UGA, and then 8 or 7 are partner universities that we work with. Our faculty and staff are dedicated to help small businesses grow. Within our organization, we provide confidential one-on-one consulting that's provided at no fee to business owners, again, with our mission to help those small businesses grow and develop into whatever level of growth that they would like. As we begin our discussion on CMMC, one can approach this topic a couple of different ways. One of those with a little trepidation about all of the expectations that are coming along with some of these cybersecurity requirements. Another, and one that we would recommend, is one of approaching it with the sense of opportunity. That if you do this right, and if you are proactive in achieving compliance with these standards, you will put yourself in a much more marketable position related to both DoD as well as other government contracting, even into the private sector. You're going to pre-position yourself to be that much more able to secure contracts going forward. Cybersecurity, a strong cybersecurity infrastructure is now really just becoming a price of doing business, both currently, but especially as we move into the future. So as we go through today, my goal, my hope is that for those that know something about CMMC already, that maybe we can provide another piece of the puzzle to help you move forward to the next level on that. For those that are not familiar, we're going to go through some of the background of how we got to where we are now, and then we'll dive into some more detail related to CMMC and especially related to Level 1. Okay, so let's move on in. We're going to go ahead and minimize my video so that you can see the screen full. But as far as the agenda today, we're just going to be talking first about the background, kind of how we got to where we are right now. We're going to get into some of the initial work within the cybersecurity infrastructure with DoD, with NIST SB 800-171. We're going to look at some of the requirements that 800-171 brings with it, which then some of those transfer into the CMMC. How one would go about becoming compliant, especially with 171 initially. And then we're going to move into the CMMC more detail, especially regarding level 1. This PowerPoint will be available after this presentation, and we'll have details for that, where you can find that after we complete today's session. So let's dive right in. Came across this this week. This was an article on Bloomberg Government. What bidders can expect on the 50 billion STARS 3 resource. And what was significant about this is that, as you see on that first line, this is for the General Services Administration, not the Department of Defense. This is another federal agency. They're looking at this huge contract, and as we look further down in the article, it says that within this, there is the potential. They reference that DoD is requiring all defense suppliers to undergo the CMMC audits, but that this initiative is likely to extend to all federal agencies. And it goes on to say that because, say, a company doesn't have CMMC compliance or certification, it's not going to disqualify them from being able to obtain, say, a GSA contract, but it may put those companies in a competitive disadvantage, especially in future years. This just speaks to the fact that pursuing CMMC is going to pre-position you not just for DoD contracts, but really for all federal contracts potentially in the coming year, as well as some of the larger corporate supply chain vendor arrangements that you might be either currently in or looking to obtain in the future. So just some background on how we got to where we are today. You can think back into 2005, where the NIST, the National Institute of Standards Technology, special publication 800-53 was released. You can see this is not a new initiative. This started back early 2000s. The 853 was an intragovernmental information security standard. So it applied between different departments within the federal government that they had to comply with certain regulations related to information security. We move up to 2010. This is when the definition, the formatting for controlled unclassified information came about. This is very relevant as we start looking at both NIST SP 800-171, but in particular CMMC, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. But this was it's not classified information. This is controlled unclassified information. So it's the type of document, the type of information that might previously have been labeled as for official use only, not for public consumption. Controlled unclassified information now encompasses all of those. Next, we had the cybersecurity framework, came in online in 2013. This is really the approach that 800-171 and CMMC, really it is kind of the background model that these requirement standards are based upon, which we'll explore that a little more detail. June 2015, 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago, NIST SP 800-171 was released. This was really an extension of 853, but extending over to private sector entities, and it was to help protect information used in the fulfillment of a contract, with that information either being housed or transmitted, stored on a computer system that was outside the DoD network. And so this was really a kind of a lighter version of 853. Published in 2015 with the expected compliance for all federal contractors to be 31 December 2016. They found out in 2016 that many companies were not ever going to be able to reach that in the time frame allowed, so they extended that to 31 December 2017. But at that point, businesses doing DoD contracting were expected to be compliant with 800-171. You can see revision 1 came out in 2018, revision 2 earlier this year. So it has been progressive, and there will be future changes, but this is a lot of the CMMC requirements are based on that 800-171 standard. The CMMC timeline really started March or so of last year, 2019. By June 2019, 0.3 version was released, and you can see it just progresses through the last year, September 0.4, November, December 0.7, and as of January 2020, version 1.0, the official version was released. And just want to make a point that this was the expected release date. They have been very diligent in meeting the timelines that they had originally set out. So even in the midst of this pandemic, CMMC moves forward and moves forward aggressively. There's been a little month or two delay in some of the training provided, but it is still on track, and we need to be prepared for what's coming. There was a version 1.02 that was released in March for CMMC. Really no substantive changes to the actual model, just some more administrative type of changes. This is a cybersecurity framework. Just wanted to kind of orient you, if you're not familiar with this, that this is really the basis for 171 as well as CMMC. 5 steps to achieve an information security compliance. Very basically, the first is identify your assets. You need to know what you have as far as hardware and software, where the information is housed, and how it is being processed with the software on your system. Once we identify those assets, then we need to protect them with appropriate software, hardware, and policies and practices in place. We need to be able to detect incidents, either malware, hacker intrusions into the system. We need to then be able to respond with a plan to those intrusions and then recover to normal operations. So as we move through this discussion here in the next few minutes, you will see aspects of the cybersecurity framework embedded within the control points, the practices that are within both 800-171 and CMMC. So what are the requirements? This is the primary trigger for a company to require them to comply with 800-171, and that's where we're gonna explore that just a little bit further. So this DFARS clause, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement 252.204-7012. It is titled Safeguarding of Unclassified Controlled Technical Information. This bad boy right here, when it is located within a contract solicitation, that clause triggers and should be an alert for you that then that contract is going to require some form of compliance to 800-171, revision 2. 800-171, in order to achieve compliance, has 14 families of security requirements. And these families are kind of like categories of different types of security requirements. And one thing you'll notice about these, or the 14, one thing you'll notice about these is that it is not just oriented toward digital information. So it's not just cyber information. You can see on the right-hand side, you got personnel security, physical protection. So this applies not only to digital information, but also that tangible hard copies of either paper printouts, models, schematics. 800-171 applies to all of those. And so as you move through 171, in addition to the 14 families and spread across these 14 families are 110 control points. These are task practices that a company has to have in place in order to be compliant. And 110 of these, and these are really robust. They're going to require probably, especially for a non-IT company, they're going to probably require you to bring in somebody that knows IT to be able to decipher not just how to do it, but what exactly are is the requirement asking for in order to be compliant. You are also required to have a system security plan and a plan of action and milestones. So you will hear the term SSP or POAM referred to. System security plan is really just a detailed, step-by-step, taking on each of the 110 control points, and it provides the format that you're going to use in order to document your compliance to that particular control point. So it goes 1 through 110, and that system security plan is in a Word document initially, and there is a template out there that we can guide you to. But the system security plan is just your documentation of how you met compliance on those 110 control points. The plan of action and milestones, the POAM, is for any control points that you're not compliant with. This is your plan of action of how you're going to get compliant. Again, there's a template out there. It's a very simple template. You fill in what is the control point that you're not compliant with, what do you need to do in order to get compliant, who's going to be working on it, what's the date of expected compliance. At this point, we're far enough into the expectation of being compliant with 800-171 that POAMs are really somewhat going by the wayside. You're expected to have a system security plan in place. And especially as we move to CMMC, the POAM really does kind of fade away because you're expected to meet the expectations for that level in order to be certified. A breach response plan, you need to know, and the government needs to know how you're going to respond probably when you are breached within your company. And their concern is, one, they don't want to lose information to a foreign entity, but they also want to be sure that you can fulfill the contract that you have agreed to. And they need to know how you're going to respond to any kind of breach. So when you see that DFARS clause, 252.204-7012, whenever you see that in a contract, you have several options in order to proceed. One is you just don't bid on the contract. If you're not compliant with the cyber expectations that are embedded within that contract, you wouldn't want to bid on the contract. Because if you're not compliant and you go ahead and bid and are awarded that contract, if you're awarded, probably the contracting officer is going to be asking you for your system security plan anyway at this point. But by some way you are awarded the contract without that verification, you potentially then fall into some legal issues within the False Claims Act, and the government can then bring suit against you and your company for falsely claiming that you were compliant when indeed you were not. You definitely want to watch that. So you not bid on the contract, you can take steps to comply with the information security requirements under 171. Again, that's probably going to be between you and the contracting officer if that's an option. You can seek an exception to the application of the rule because sometimes there might be some alternative ways or it might not be applicable to you. And in your system security plan, that could be documented. and again, you can maybe suggest an alternative that would be equally effective, and just that is the way your company would be working to achieve compliance with that requirement. And so you can provide that. As we move into this, these next few examples, just wanted you to be aware of some definitions, because some of these definitions, you know, true federal government, Army, can be a little confusing. So we're going to just walk through some of the terms that are tossed around sometimes fairly frequently, just so you're aware of these. One is DIB, Defense Industrial Base. Most of us are familiar with that one. Covered Defense Information, CDI. This is kind of a broad, all-inclusive information defined by Department of Defense in this case, that if certain information is deemed covered CDI, covered defense information, then that needs to be treated a certain way. Federal contract information, again, it's a little, it's still kind of broad, FCI, because federal contract information is information provided by the government in the fulfillment of a contract for, in this case, DOD. So some of the requirements that we'll see in CMMC come back to federal contract information as one of the defining terms that triggers certain compliance standards. CUI, Controlled Unclassified Information. Again, this is defined and determined by the Department of Defense at this point. They will, within a contract, determine that certain information is going to be considered CUI. If there is CUI within a contract solicitation, potentially, still somewhat of a moving target, but potentially that's going to require level 3 compliance. And at this point, it requires 800-171 compliance if you're handling controlled unclassified information. Code of Federal Regulations, CFR, you'll see that term here in just a little bit. CFR, again, just Code of Federal Regulations that determine certain aspects, and in this case, related to CMMC, this is where the defining practice, the practices for CMMC Level 1 are found within one of the code CFRs. DCMA, Defense Contract Management Agency, and Defense Industrial Base Cybersecurity Assessment Center. You will see that they are a couple of the organizations that are currently reviewing SSPs. Just want to be aware that they are out there and they are reviewing things. You'll see that example here in a second. So this is FedBizOps as it looked a couple of years ago. Many of you might be familiar with this one, this particular site, if you've done federal contracting in the past. You can see this was a simple lawnmower that was put out there for bid. You can see way down, if you scroll down 4 or 5 pages on the website, way down at the bottom of the solicitation, there is the DFARS clause 252, 204, 7012. Very unobtrusive. You can miss it if you're not looking for it, but if it's there, that potentially triggers 800-171 compliance. As we move to more current, this is the SAM.gov. Now, FBO, FedBizOps, is integrated within SAM.gov. This is for firefighter turnout gear. And as you scroll way down, you can see, yep, there it is, 252, 204, 7012. It is in there. And this came out July 17th, 2020, this particular solicitation. This next one is an interesting one. This is the Assault Breacher Vehicle Remote Control System Market Survey. It's not an actual solicitation, but it is one of the ways the federal government is gaining information and starting to put out information related to CMMC. So you can see it was fairly recent, within the past month. As you came on down in the solicitation, look at this. This requirement is a candidate for a CMMC pilot program. So starts talking about that. As you went on further down, Item 23. So it starts asking, have you ever been asked federal contract to transmit, store, process FCI, federal contract information in non-federal information systems? Okay, so then it asks, okay, so which of the 800-171 requirements have not been met? Has your system security plan ever been obsessed? And there's that DCMA DIBTech. It's not asking, do you have a system security plan? It is assuming that you've already got it. And it's just asking, has it been assessed? It is asking for how many of your potential subcontractors have ever been required to comply with that FAR clause and the DFARS 7012. How many are expected to be involved with the transmission, storage, processing of FCI or CUI? And how many or what percentage of your potential subcontractors have SSPs? Now, so what this is, I mean, 800-171 doesn't just apply, as does CMMC, doesn't just apply to prime contractors. It is a flow down throughout the supply chain for whatever contract. So the expectation is that if you're using subcontractors, part of your responsibility is to ensure that they are compliant and that you have copies of their system security plan. So this was just an interesting example of how things are progressing and what kind of questions potentially you're going to be faced with as you move forward in a DoD contract. So how do we get compliant? Well, several steps. This comes from Jennifer Reese, Washington Technology. There's an article came out last year, but had some really good tips on some things to consider related to becoming compliant. Kind of a 5-step process. First step, determine the scope of the contract. Is the information required to complete the contract? Is it going to include FCI, CDI, CUI? Is the information going to be just digital? Is it going to be more hard copies? We're talking about engineering drawings, specification, models. Where is that, if it is CUI, where is that CUI going to be housed within your system? Because that's going to have some implications as to your ability to comply with that. Where is the information that you're using to complete the contract going to be stored on your system? So once we determine the scope of the contract, then we need to assess, you would want to assess your level of compliance if you haven't already. And as far as level of compliance, this is where you're really going through the system security plan, that you've got documented information related to where you are compliant. There is a great handbook, especially when you're dealing with 800-171. Great handbook is the NIST Handbook 162. So if you go out there and do a search for NIST Handbook 162, Manufacturing Extension Partnership helped develop that, just did a really good job of bringing some of those 110 control points. It's a huge, I mean, a very large document, but takes each of those 110 control points, walks through questions that you would want to be asking yourself to determine if you're compliant, and then gives information what that compliance looks like and maybe who in the company you need to be asking to determine that. Department of Homeland Security has a software program called CSET, the Computer Security Evaluation Tool. It's a little older school. This is CSET 8.0 at one point, but it does a really good job of allowing you to, if you need to diagram a network map, it's got a pretty good tool within that. You need to document your findings. Again, within the system security plan, clarify how you're going to move forward, your plan of action milestones, which again, that is starting to fall by the wayside because you're expected to already have that in place now. You need to have your system security plan developed, and NIST does have that document out there that you can pull down as a Word document, and then that kind of gives the formatting that you might want to use in order to start populating your compliance. And there are other companies out there that do this. I mean, you just pay them, they come in, do your assessment, help develop your system security plan. If you choose to, it's just going to cost some out-of-pocket money. And then you need to be looking at ongoing compliance initiatives. What is going to be happening maybe with future contracts, possibly the ones that you are already involved with at this point, when they come up for renewal, what is going to be the level of compliance expected for those? Are new contracts that are coming out going to expect something different related to cybersecurity? You need to be aware of what's coming down the pike related to those. So those are kind of 5 steps, real quick overview. As you're looking at getting compliant with 800-171, and we're going to move into CMMC now, but again, right now, 800-171 is the standard that is being used to determine compliance to cybersecurity and information security. So it is important until CMMC comes online, especially with a contract you're going after, that 171 is the standard you need to focus on. And there are some crossovers, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. So what is a maturity model? Maturity model is really just a tool for assessing how embedded certain systems, processes are within a company. So there are certain practices probably that go on within your organization that are just, they're just intrinsic to the way you do business. Those are really more mature than, say, something that is just done maybe one-off occasionally. It is not really the part of the day-to-day process of operating the business. Maturity model measures how well these practices, these systems and processes are used and embedded within the organization day to day. So it can help identify where practices are weak, where they're not taken seriously, by how actively they're used and how much a part of the company they are. Kind of helps distinguish between maybe one that's baked in, that's just part of an organization. Like if you're in a cake, there are certain ingredients that are just baked into that cake. And then there are others, maybe like the icing that's just on top, that can be scraped off pretty easily, but it'd be kind of hard to take out the flour within a cake. So maturity model is going to look at how well those practices and processes are baked into the operation of the business. And it helps leadership determine progress that's being made in order to embed that security into their day-to-day operations as well as strategically. So as we move in now to the CMMC details, a little of this might be background for you. We'll just take it one step at a time. One of the major differences between CMMC and compliance to 800-171 is that 800-171 is a self-attestation that you are saying this is your system security plan. You've gone through and you've assessed and you've determined that you're compliant with these standards, and you do that yourself or within your company. CMMC differs because it requires a third party, in-person, on-site cybersecurity certification audit to validate how well you are complying with these security practices. You will see this is the certifying third-party assessor organization, C3PAO. That's how it's referred to. You'll hear it used in that context, C3PAO. But these are going to be the companies that are trained and hired to come out to do those assessments on your company. And these individual entities are, as we speak, being trained in order to be able to do those assessments. You can see on the right-hand side, the CMMC accreditation body estimates that up to 6,000 companies are going to be required for CMMC certification in fiscal year 2021. I was on a webinar a week or so ago with Katie Arrington, kind of the lead on helping bring CMMC to fruition. and she was estimating around 7,100 next year. So you can see the website there, cmmcab.org. One of those great resources we'll reference at the end here, but you would want to be watching for and bookmarking that site. They're going to grade cybersecurity infrastructure, these C3 PAOs, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most stringent. Most small businesses, medium-sized businesses, probably are going to fall somewhere from level 1 to level 3, depending on the type information contained within that contract. 4 and 5 are going to be more the classified, some of the more higher security type of contracts. Standards were defined January 2020 with the release of CMMC version 1.0. Certifying companies, those C3 PAOs are being trained now. They'll be certified by this summer, end of this summer, and ongoing. Others will be trained. Think about this, approximately 300,000 DoD contractors, and some estimates more than that, will need to be certified. So 7,000 next year. That means that probably somewhere between 70 to 80,000 will need to be certified in the next 4 years. And you want to think about, if you're bidding on a contract or you're looking a year out to bid on a contract and it has a CMMC level tag to it and you're not certified, there's going to be a backlog of certifications coming up very shortly. So the more proactive you can be in getting certified, the better for you. RFIs and RFPs will be coming out, if not already, this summer and really into September, October, November for fiscal year 2021, and they will start having those CMMC requirements embedded within them. So again, doesn't just apply to the prime, it applies to subs all the way down. So depending, it's not necessarily true that the sub will have to have the same level, CMMC level, as the prime. It depends on the type of information that sub will be using in order to fulfill their part of the contract. But it is pretty much accepted that every contractor has to have at least level 1 certification. The model framework is built this way. So you have domains. That's kind of the security family. If you think back to 800.171, domains are kind of those overarching categories. There are 17 categories within the current CMMC model framework. They look like this. We'll look at those in a second. But you got capabilities that are kind of the next tier down from the domain. So you got 43 capabilities, which are the achievements necessary for a company, say, to ensure that cybersecurity has been obtained within each of those domains. And then practices and processes. The practices are really just the task that will help a company fulfill that capability. So these are the activities, the day-to-day things that are being done in order to ensure information security. You can see there are a total of 171 of these practices and processes that are defined within the total 1 through 5 of CMMC. These are the 17 domains. Just wanted to point out a couple of things as you're looking at these. You can see you got the name there, access control, that first one. Right below the name is a 2-letter identifier. That has significance. You would want to be aware that that is helped in the naming and defining of individual practices. So they will be really tied to the particular domain as you start looking, and we're going to look at that in a second. But that's the first thing. So you got a 2-letter designator per domain. You want to pay attention to that. But then also, you will see that these are arranged in alphabetical order, right? From left to right, and then we move down to second row, left to right, and so forth. That helps one navigate the appendices that we're going to see here in just a second to figure out what exactly is involved with getting compliant to level 1. So you need to understand these are the domains, and then capabilities, practices fall within these. This is kind of how it looks like. If you look at level 1 to level 5, this comes out of the CMMC model by Carnegie Mellon and Johns Hopkins. The level 1 just states that the practices within level 1 are being performed. Not necessarily documented. You might not be managing processes or systems. It is just basic cyber hygiene, that those are being performed. Those practices are being performed. This is kind of the way it looks as you move from level 1 to level 5. Level 1 has 17 practices within it. As you look at level 2 next to it, it has those 17 plus 55 additional practices. Level 3, an additional 58. So as you move from level to level, you need to be compliant with the prior level, and then the additional practices will be added to that. Okay. Remember I was talking about the Code of Federal Regulations, so 48 CFR 52.204-21. This is basic safeguarding of covered contractor information systems. This is the CFR that defines the 17 practices that are the basis for level 1 compliance. As we look at these 17 practices, you can see that there are, within level 1, there are 6 domains that are addressed. So you know, if you think back, 800-171 required compliance on 110 control points. This really is an advantage now because level 1 is only requiring 17 practices. There are 6 domains, there are 9 capabilities, and in the 17 practices. So this helps a small business somewhat distinguish where they need to focus on right now. Now, then the question is, okay, so where are these practices found? If you go to this website, which we will have that in the resources, but when you come to this website, which is the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, CMMC, you'll see the button up top, CMMC model. When you click on that, you see this page. This right here, you got the model right above the red circle, but you got the CMMC model version 1.02 there, the overview briefing. Really the most helpful, the model is helpful, but to define what exactly are the practices involved with achieving level 1 would be found in the appendices. When you go into the appendices, there are 6, A through F. This is a 337-page document. So within the appendices, the 2 most helpful for you probably will be Appendix A, which is kind of almost a grid matrix of the entire CMMC model. We're going to look at one here in just a second, a page or 2 of it. And then Appendix B, which goes into greater depth of what exactly each individual practice requirement is going to be compliant with that. All right, as we look at the practice itself, this is the kind of the numbering system that is used in order to define the CMMC individual practices. The AC, if you remember, that's that 2-letter designator, which is for access control. The 1 indicates the CMMC level. So if this was going to be level 2 or 3, then that would be AC.2. whatever. And then the 001 is the practice number, just the number assigned to that practice. And it is sequential, as you will see. It moves down through the level 1. This is AC.1.001 practice that you limit information system access to authorized users. Okay, we'll look at this one a little more depth here in just a second. But anyway, within Appendix A, kind of that grid matrix, this is what the grid matrix looks like. And this is probably, I think it comes to about 40 pages or so, 38, 40 pages of Appendix A. And so you've got your domain up top. Next, you've got your capability, and you can see this is the first capability, C001, establish system access requirements. You can see your level. This is level 1, and as you read to the right, all the way up to level 5. And then you've got your number, AC.1.001, and then there's the description along with where that information potentially came from. So as you read down in Appendix A, as we flip to the next page, you will see that the practice numbers are sequential numbered by column. So as you move down AC.1.001, the next practice is AC.1.002. So you've got your second capability here within access control. You've got level 1, and then you've got AC.1.002. So this is the second practice within access control. And you can see on the right at level 2, right horizontally across, AC.2.007, you will follow, and the numbering system goes all the way down level 1 within that domain, and then it moves all the way back up to the top for level 2 within that domain and counts down vertically, and then it moves to level 3, level 4, level 5. So that's the numbering system. So that's about 38, 40 pages, Appendix A. Then when you move to Appendix B takes, say, that first practice, limit information system, and this is probably going to be the most helpful, that it will then take the discussion, again, from 800-171, it will take that content and it will provide a little additional detail of what 171 had related to that practice. But even more helpful than that is that it provides some clarification. So it starts describing in a little more understandable language what exactly is discussion from source talking about. What is that practice expecting in more conversational language? And then it provides 1 or 2 examples of how that would look within a company. So Appendix B is really going to be a go-to place to figure out exactly, maybe in a little more understandable language, what's expected. And then you've got references that are provided. So the Appendix B is about 250 pages. So it takes each of the expectations of these 171 practices and it goes through. And that's where it's important to understand the numbering system so you can tell which is a level 1 practice, 2, and 3, and so forth. So how do we move forward? This has been a lot of information. I realize that. What would be some steps to consider in moving forward from where you are now to getting compliant? Probably one of the first things is see how you are compliant to the 800-171 at this point. And it might require having someone outside come in. It could be just working through internally the system security plan, but just to get a sense of where you stand, because if you're bidding on contracts now, this is probably going to be the standard used. If you haven't developed an SSP and POAM, especially the SSP, now is the time to get to work on that. Again, this is not something you would want to wait on. And moving forward, as you saw, this has been going on for years. And so the expectation is that you do have a system security plan at this point. Next, you want to probably start looking at, well, how are you compliant to CMMC Level 1? So if you've done your system security plan, a lot of those are going to transfer to Level 1 compliance also. So where do you stand related to the 17 practices within Level 1? You can do an internal assessment yourself or an external assessment. There was the webinar is on with Katie Arrington from a company called Solarium. They have if you become a member, they're a free nonprofit, but if you apply to membership there and are approved as a defense contractor, then you can download some really user-friendly Excel spreadsheets that will provide some guidance on in measurement to allow you to do some internal assessments on compliance to the different levels. They look very user-friendly as you work through those. But there are other companies out there that you can go to that can help you determine compliance. You want to move to comply with all Level 1 requirements. So as you're looking at developing your system security plan, if you identify there are certain things, maybe certain practices that are in Level 1, but they're also part of 800-171 compliance, your one recommendation would be focus on those that would help you achieve level 1 compliance first. That kind of sets the priority as far as achieving 171 compliance also. Once implemented, have some external assessment completed to just determine where you stand, how comfortable you are with the way in which you have satisfied those requirements. And then you're going to move towards certification to CMMC Level 1 with one of those C3PAOs. This is going to be a continually evolving model. We'll see changes, especially as it starts getting implemented this fall. We'll see changes probably coming out, but now is the time to get started and to be working toward compliance. It has, these are some of the resources that you're going to want to consider. There are a number of others, but TAG Online, as Amy was discussing, the Georgia Defense Industrial Base Task Force, Georgia Department of Economic Development has a website called CyberSecurity Edge. In that initiative, you can see where it is located. The CMMC accreditation body has their website that we were in just a little bit ago with the C3PAOs. And then the DoD site, which is where we were finding the CMMC documentation, appendices and all, is located there. So a lot of information. We want to be there to help you in any way we can. On behalf of the University of Georgia, it has been a pleasure being here today with you. We look forward to assisting you in any way we can as you move forward through this process.
Thanks, Mark. That was a fantastic presentation. We appreciate it. You know, this CMMC, you said some things that were really great. And I just want to introduce myself. I'm Roy Hadley. I'm with Adams and Reese. I'm also on the Georgia Defense Industrial Board Task Force. We also have Amy Hudnall, who will be joining us shortly. And we also have Cassia Baker, who both are with the Georgia Department of Economic Development and are also on, like all of us, on the task force here to help Georgia businesses that are in the defense industrial base to get compliant with CMMC and other cybersecurity requirements that are coming down the pipe. That said, first, Mark, I did want to ask you a question. A question came up on, and there's Amy. Hi, Amy. A question came up on our Q&A board, and that is, you know, you talk about steps and getting going and those sorts of things and kind of looking at CMMC, or I'm sorry, looking at 800-171, NIST 800-171. How can, you know, are there any tools or anything out there that can help somebody that is trying to self-assess against NIST 800-171 that they can use as a resource or as a guide?
Yes, Roy. NIST itself has developed an assessment tool that you can walk through to help do an internal self-assessment.
Okay.
The NIST Handbook 162 would recommend that one again because it takes each of those control points and works to explain what questions you need to be asking to determine compliance, who you would need to ask in the company, what you need to be looking for. Those would be two ready references to determine that compliance.
Okay, fantastic. What we'll do, and I do want to say that we'll put Mark's presentation on the TAG website so that you can see it. We'll put the slide deck, and we'll also put a link to the actual presentation itself so that you can have those. We'll also endeavor to put a link up to that self-assessment tool that Mark just mentioned, so that if you're looking for that, you can go out and find it pretty quickly. Amy, let me switch to you here for a second. Another question came up, and that is, who needs to be certified? I think there's still some confusion out there in the defense industrial base, you know, the supply chain for the DoD, as to who exactly needs to be certified under CMMC. I know there was a stat that was put out there, you know, people are wondering whether self-assessment works still. Who needs to be certified? I think you're muted.
If you're currently doing business with the DoD, then you need to go ahead and get certified. And as Mark alluded to, it's going to be super congested as people work through these 300,000 defense contractors. So I would recommend that you start now. The GAO estimated that only about 40%, 45% of the people who have been self-certifying that they're complying with DFARS 7012, only about 45% could pass a third-party assessment. So I would hear that as a call to action, and start reviewing your documentation now. And as we're going to post these things on the TAG website, but CyberSecurity Edge has a lot of these self-assessment resources listed. And we also have a dedicated project manager, Cassia Baker, who's on the screen, who you can call and talk to a real person about how to get started. So.
Okay, fantastic. And Cassie, I'm going to circle back to you in 1 second and let you close us out with, one more time talking about where people can find these resources. One question did pop up, Mark, for you, and that is it possible that, if you're in the DoD supply chain, is it possible that you may have to certify at more than one level depending upon the project? And if you do, let's just say, and I'm throwing you a ringer here now, if you are required to certify at level 4 for something, will that, and level 2 for something else, will the level 4 certification be sufficient for the level 2 certification? I.e., if you're certified at a higher level, does that necessarily mean you've certified at the lower levels?
One would think it should be, but you do have to pay attention. I was reading an article this morning that depending on where the information is being processed and housed for that particular contract, there is discussion that possibly the level certification might apply or could apply just to where that information is being housed for that particular contract. So if you're working a couple of contracts in different parts of your system, possibly that could require additional. But in theory, if you've got a higher level certification, that should cover any lower level certification.
Okay, fantastic. And then Cassia, one more time, if you could, as Amy said, you're a dedicated resource to really help the Georgia DIB and those businesses, small, mid-sized businesses in particular, that are in the supply chain here in Georgia, dedicated resource to help them. Run over resources one more time. I know Amy mentioned Cyber Edge. We've got the tag stuff. And also, how can people get in contact with you?
Yes. So I will highlight what Mark and Amy have both said. Mark's slide deck will include the exact links to all of these, but CyberSecurity Edge was developed by the Georgia Department of Economic Development and includes links to a number of resources that you'll find very helpful. I also highly recommend, as Mark said, going back to the CMMC AB website, checking it frequently, as they do update it quite frequently. Some other things that might be helpful for you as well is my email. I can be reached at cbaker@georgia.org, and you're welcome to send me an email. Amy and I are working on this constantly and are happy to help find a connection point to help you move forward. And we'll include links to the task force as well, which has a direct link within the Tag Online website on Mark's slide deck.
Okay, fantastic. So again, Mark, great job. We appreciate it. Great information. For those listening, we will be posting it, so look for that. Amy, Cassia, as always, thank you so much for helping here and participating. And again, great resources out there for you. We appreciate you listening today, taking the time out, and we're here to help. CMMC is here, and we are too. Thank you and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.